Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, episode number 157 of Let's Go Racing Time with Joe Dominic Conaghan here with you as we look back at the weekend that was at Daytona. Just who everybody thought. Harrison Burton gets the win in the Coke Zero Sugar 400. We'll look back at that. Also, look at the NASCAR playoff picture ahead of the regular season finale this weekend at Darlington, the Southern 500. We'll talk about that and more coming up in just a little while from right now. Plus, we'll have our news and notes, the latest headlines from around the sport as NASCAR's headed to Mexico. Very exciting stuff there. We'll break that down as well as what's going on with some driver changes. And then we'll also have our mailbag segment coming up at the end of today's show as well. Dominic joins me right now. Dominic, how about that win for Harrison Burton? What a moment for Harrison Burton, sharing it with his dad there, getting his first victory, delivering the Wood brothers their 100th win, and locking up a spot in the playoffs. Just crazy. I did not picture Saturday going that way, and it was just an unbelievable finish there.
There was so much to unpack with that victory and that race, and the whole race weekend as a collective too. But the final restart and the fact that you have somebody making their second start in Parker Retzlaff pushing Harrison Burton, giving him that push that ultimately gave him the win, and just the historical aspect of it too, Tyler. That 21 car and Daytona go hand in hand. Cale Yarborough, Davey Allison, Neil Bonnet, Morgan Shepherd, Michael Waltrip, a lot of drivers to win in that car. And in the 21, not necessarily Michael Waltrip, but Trevor Bayne, and the history of the Wood Brothers organization. Tyler, I would compare, you being the football guy, I feel like the Wood Brothers would be like that classic Detroit Lions. And I don't mean that as a knock on either team, but been around a long time, has shown signs of brilliance, was great back in the day, never won the big championship. But man, they're going to the playoffs. That 21 team is going back to the playoffs for the first time in 7 years. Harrison Burton in a lame duck season. Tyler, we were talking about it last week, how not only were their drivers racing for their seasons, but when we're talking about it with David, there were drivers that Saturday night racing for potentially their careers. And I got to imagine winning fixes a lot. It won't fix and remedy being able to return to that car next year, but Harrison Burton's probably going to be getting more phone calls after that win.
Yeah, I would think so. And whether it's with another Cup team or a pretty good Xfinity ride, that certainly helps out. Winning cures everything. And you look at just what had happened to Harrison Burton, he has struggled. No ifs or ands or buts about that, of what he's done with that Penske team, or with the Wood Brothers team, run by Penske, of course, over the last few seasons. They were 34th in points entering Daytona. He was last place among full-time drivers, only had 2 top 10 finishes, and now he's in the playoff here. And I know that some folks, Dom, don't like the idea of a driver that had done that poorly throughout the season being in the postseason. But honestly, I don't hate it at all, Dom. He didn't do anything dirty like Austin Dillon. He went out there and he earned it. I know it was at Daytona and, anything could happen there. But at the end of the day, NASCAR has been pushing hard for these guys to go out, go get wins. I don't think Harrison Burton's going to do anything in the playoffs, but we mentioned compared to other sports, it's that upset. It's St. Peter's getting into the NCAA tournament, getting that automatic bid as a conference champion. We get to the playoffs, it's a whole new season. I don't think Harrison's going to do anything, but I like the idea of, him shaking things up a bit. And, with having Penske's backing, who knows if it could be turning a corner potentially here for Harrison Burton here. I have no problem with him being in the playoff. He went out there and earned it fair and square.
Yeah, you got to imagine it would be a great deal to see him make a run in the playoffs. Remains to be seen. But Tyler, I got to imagine too, Penske has a hand in helping with that car. And it's not going to be, in my opinion, Penske's not going to fork over the best equipment without a premium or a dollar like we saw with Joe Gibbs Racing and Furniture Row Racing over the years. But I do have to imagine there's a little more incentive now. I feel like, and I could be wrong as an outsider, just purely speculating on what's going on the inside, that Team Penske could have more of a hand possibly in prepping that 21 car in that round of 16 and trying to see if the 21 car could advance. Because let's be honest, that might help the efforts of Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, or Austin Cindric in their bid for the playoffs and being able to see that. So, and I can tell you too, from years ago, this is granted the Xfinity Series. When Ross Chastain won that race in Las Vegas in 2018, and it was before the Xfinity Series playoff, I remember talking with people, and there were talks. It wasn't formulated, but that Chip Ganassi Racing was very tempted in helping out the JD Motorsports entry for that first round of the playoffs because Chastain was going to be in. So it makes me wonder if there could be more underneath the surface that we're just not aware of right now. I got to imagine it only helps everybody at the end of the day, especially if Penske's trying to help his cars. Why not help Harrison Burton and that team in that first round of the playoffs?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that Wood Brothers car has been seen as the de facto number 4 Penske team for so long. And Roger Penske making a lot of the decisions for the Wood Brothers over the years. It only makes sense that they would help out Harrison Burton as much as they can. And you look at Harrison Burton, not having anything locked up for next year and trying to figure out his future here, at the time of this recording, we don't know of any announcement coming anytime soon. Maybe something happens between now and when this show is published, but doesn't seem like that's on the horizon anyway. Although he's not going to be back in that 21 car, this is a golden opportunity for Harrison Burton. If he can turn a corner and have a few good runs, if he could potentially get past the round of 16, if he could get to the round of 12 or the round of 8, that could totally change his career trajectory and give him much better opportunities potentially next year or beyond here. This is a really good chance for him to reset things.
Certainly, and you got to imagine winning gives you a lot of momentum. David would attest to that. Any competitor, I think, such a momentum-based sport. And we're coming up to Darlington, where Harrison Burton has run well. He has scored top 10 finishes in the Cup Series in the next-gen era in this car. And then you have Atlanta to open up the playoffs here in a couple of weeks. Momentum is very real, Tyler. And who's not to say a good run in Atlanta? You have good fortune and misfortune of other playoff guys. He could easily be on his way towards a path of being able to advance through that round of 16. And again, if good cars are knocked out and the Penske teams are able to advance through, Roger Penske is going to be the one that ends up winning at the end of the day. Remains to be seen about Watkins Glen. Anything could happen there as well, too, with stage racing and all that. But Bristol, Harrison Burton seems to have something figured out on the short tracks. So you have 2 good tracks that could play into his wheelhouse with Atlanta and Bristol and kind of get a pass at Watkins Glen. It wouldn't shock me to see him make it to the round of 12.
Yeah, you never know. And it just requires some bad luck potentially of some other guys. And then he's right back there in the mix. How about the moment, not only the Wood Brothers getting their 100th win that they've been waiting for a long time, but Jeff Burton in the booth. And we saw the reaction afterwards, him high-fiving Lee Diffie and Steve Letarte. And I mean, got to shout out Lee Diffie for calling a hell of a job for his first Cup race since taking over as the lead voice of NASCAR and NBC. I mean, he made it feel like a major event and brought the action like we talked about last week. Yeah. I mean, the storytelling in that moment to say, Jeff, your little boy has done it. I mean, that's an iconic call. It's going to go down as one of the greatest moments, I think, in Daytona, with credit where credit's due Lee for that moment of what he did to build it to that point. But Jeff being there and them telling Jeff, like, hey, go down and celebrate with your boy. Get out of here. I mean, all of that, if you're a NASCAR fan, you don't even have to be a NASCAR fan to appreciate just how storybook that moment was for Harrison, for his dad, Jeff, and the Wood brothers all around there.
Oh, certainly. Like, think about when Ned Jarrett got to call Dale Jarrett to his first Daytona 500 victory in '93. It's shades of that. That broadcast has been 31 years ago in the past. And
I thought about DW and Michael Waltrip, the Daytona 500.
Absolutely. Of course, that day was overshadowed with other things, but of course, that call too, that family connection in Daytona, certainly there's something that goes a long way with that. And Jeff Burton going down and hugging his son, and Harrison even saying too that what he really hopes that he remembers from this whole victory is he stood up on the car and he turned around and his whole family was there. The team was there. Everybody who has a hand in prepping that car, to everybody that has supported him, had been there. And Tyler, too, I think just showing his human side, too. He said he cried on the whole cool-down lap back to the start-finish line and that he had never, ever cried after winning a race. That had never even crossed his mind. But given the circumstances, given the lame duck situation, given the uncertainty of his future, I'm sure that bears a lot on him, man. That's a lot of stress relieved, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. So with that, that certainly shook up the NASCAR playoff picture. And let's go over that right now, where things stand right now with the NASCAR playoff standings at this point, with one race to go heading into Darlington. We'll preview the Darlington race here in just a few moments. But let's start with looking at the standings at this point of the playoff picture right now. Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, William Byron, Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, Austin Cindric, Daniel Suarez, Alex Bowman, and Harrison Burton are all in the NASCAR playoffs with the wins that they have. Then you go from there. That's where things get interesting. Martin Truex, 58 points ahead of the cutoff. Dominic, he just, as long as the engine fires, he's pretty much in the playoff there with one of
And no
those
new winner.
and no new winner. And he's pretty much in at that point. Then that's where things start to get a little interesting. Ty Gibbs, 39 points to the good. Chris Buescher, 21 points to the good. And on the outside, you got Bubba Wallace, 21 points out. Ross Chastain, 27 points out. Kyle Busch, 106. Chase Briscoe, 144. Then the others beyond that. With the way things are shaping out, Truex, Gibbs, and Buescher, those top three, they would obviously like a win, but they can run pretty much a conservative race for the most part. They don't have to run crazy strategies or try to be like Austin Dillon and try to wreck a guy, more than likely to make the playoff. If they have a good race and no problems, they should be in good shape. But you look at those other guys, Dom, the way things stack up. If you're Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Kyle Busch, anybody else beyond there, I mean, 21 is a lot of points. 27 is a lot of points. You pretty much need to focus on getting a win this weekend at Darlington to make the postseason.
It certainly seems so. And you bring up a great point, too. The engine fires. If Truex collects stage points, because he's 58 to the good, the most you can make up in a race is 59 points outside of the Coke 600. So outside of a new winner, Truex is a virtual lock. But Ty Gibbs, I know he had said, too, that he was looking forward to this race. And he ran well in the springtime. He won the pole, I believe, and finished second, led some laps. So got to feel good about that natural momentum. But beyond that, there's going to be crazy strategy. We know this isn't Daytona, but we have seen Darlington come down to some final restarts in this next gen era. At least twice that comes to mind, Tyler. And with that being said, who's not to say there's some crazy pit stop strategies. We saw Kyle Busch take a 2-tire pit stop on a long green flag run at Michigan, and it almost worked out in his favor. So there's too many variables. Nobody is safe. I think if you're on that bubble, Martin Truex Jr. is probably feeling the best, but cautiously optimistic. A bad run by Ty Gibbs and somebody else getting a win will just bump him, put Chris Buescher in the playoffs, and whoever that new winner could be. Tyler, I know it's not Daytona wildcard. I know, but I still feel like there are just so many variables or so many unknowns right now. Darlington will be a great race on Sunday night.
Yeah, I think so. And, I look at this too, Dom, of where we're at in this playoff situation. And we know Ross Chastain will do anything to win. The Hail Melon we all remember. Bubba Wallace can be aggressive. Kyle Busch came so close last week. He came off that white flag lap thinking he was going to win the race and was that close to being in the playoff right there. You got some guys out there that you cannot count out this week. They might not be in the playoff. They may not have a win right now, but they're going to do whatever it takes to get in that postseason here. Dom, I think we would be remiss to count anybody out to think this is settled before Sunday of any of these playoff spots right now.
No, absolutely. And Kyle Busch is a great example of that. Somebody who has won at Darlington, somebody who has run historically well at that racetrack. It wouldn't shock me, Tyler. We've talked about it. I've picked him the last 2 weeks to win, and he's finished top 5 at Michigan and Daytona, respectively. And there's just something about that 8 car and Kyle Busch. I feel like there's some momentum. Maybe a little too late. We'll see after Sunday night. But of the drivers who are on that outside looking in, I got to feel like Ross Chastain and Kyle Busch are probably the ones that would have the best chance to win, Tyler, on Sunday. I know there's 18 guys that can still make the playoffs that are still eligible that are not in the playoffs right now. But my gosh, the playoff spots are just starting to shrink up. This is your final chance. You got to imagine there's going to be some crazy strategy calls. But if we're talking straight up speed, Trackhouse and RCR might be your best of those bats.
Yeah, I think so. What I wonder too, Dom, I'm very curious about this, is that in the past, we've seen when it comes to the championship race where drivers will move out of the way and let the championship four kind of compete for the win. Now, you may recall last year at Phoenix, Ross Chastain did not do that, and he won the race and, stole the show from Ryan Blaney to an extent. I say that to say Ross Chastain finds himself in this spot. We know that Bubba Wallace has his fair share of enemies out there, and also Dillon has some new ones now, and Kyle Busch has some enemies out there. I don't think that any of these drivers that are locked in right now, they might be running conservative races themselves, just because that, hey, they're already in. They don't want to damage any equipment, just want to go in with momentum. But I don't see them necessarily doing these guys outside of the playoff picture any favors, unless it's maybe a teammate or something. I don't think that they're going to make it easy on these guys to make the playoffs.
No, you can't imagine it won't be. And all the rules are out the window. I feel like there's been like that maybe gentleman's agreement in the past, like how you brought up Phoenix. But no, 37 drivers out there on Sunday night. There's going to be some really, really good racing, and no one's going to move over. Everybody wants to have a shot to win. And again, with so many drivers on the outside that are capable of winning, so many good cars that could potentially miss the playoffs, we're going to have teams that made the playoffs last year that will not make it this year. Good cars. That parity that NASCAR wanted with the next gen, it's maybe not 2022's parity, but it's still pretty darn close, Tyler. The fact that we have 13 winners in the first 25 races says something.
Well, and then one thing I think about too, as far as, helping guys out, whatever, Truex and Gibbs, both in similar positions, but even though they're teammates, they got to be looking out for themselves. Chris Buescher's only got one teammate in Brad Keselowski. Bubba Wallace only has one teammate in Tyler Reddick. Ross Chastain only has one teammate, Daniel Suarez, who's in the playoff, and Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon are in the same spot, each on the outside. And, the Stewart-Haas guys, none of them are locked in at this point either. Like, there's not, if you're looking for help from teammates, you're not going to be finding what you're looking for. It's kind of every man for themselves going into Sunday here.
I would imagine so too. And Tyler, I kind of want to ask you on this too, with that perspective of 23-11. All these guys are going to be running their own race, but Tyler Reddick's in that big race of his own to win the regular season championship. For that team, how they had their starts 2021, and Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin have invested and built this program over the last 4 years. How big will it be if Tyler Reddick can deliver that regular season championship with MJ there? We've seen so many drivers lead the regular season championship. Tyler Reddick picked it up after his win in Michigan and hasn't looked back. How big would that be for the organization as a whole, Tyler?
Oh, it'd be their biggest accomplishment yet in the history of that organization. Currently, they're 17 points ahead of Kyle Larson. And, this has been a quiet, consistent year for Tyler Reddick. We talked about it last week that, he's got 2 wins. He's got 3 stage wins, 11 top 5, 17 top 10s. By far more top 10s than any driver in the sport. They've run consistent week in and week out. And obviously they love to win, but just run a clean race and bring home that regular season title would be huge. And you can't count out that 45 team with their chances to bring home the whole thing. So Tyler Reddick, I'm sure he would like to help his teammate get in the playoff, but his number one goal is not to get Bubba Wallace in the playoff on Sunday. It's to get himself that regular season championship.
Oh, absolutely. And we know MJ's going to be there in attendance, and Darlington and the historical success that Toyota has seemed to have there lately, and Tyler Reddick running well. I feel like there's got to be a little bit of a redemption story in there too. The fact that Reddick and Buescher battled for that win in the spring, and it kind of got away. What a best way to cap off the regular season with a win on Sunday in Darlington.
Yeah, I think so. I think that'd be big for them, big for that program if they can pull that off as far as that goes. Well, speaking of the regular season standings here, Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott are the only other drivers that could win the regular season title. Kyle Larson 17 points back, Chase Elliott 18 points back. And, Dom, I'm surprised because Kyle had this thing in the bag, it seemed like several weeks ago, even with missing a race, with not racing at Charlotte. And Chase Elliott, just a few weeks back, had the regular season point standings lead. Now he's 18 points back here. I would think that these two teams are still going to be strong, still some of the favorites when it comes playoff time, but they're not running necessarily their best performance wise now compared to what they were at one point earlier in the season. Do you think there should be a bit of concern for the 5 and the 9 right now?
You might even want to add the 24 in there, but we've
Yeah.
tended to see this with Hendrick Motorsports over the years, Tyler, in this chase era, the playoff era, where there's been fast starts and maybe, I don't want to call it sandbagging, but a little bit of, I got to imagine, R&D or trying different things that you typically wouldn't because you're in that spot because you've won races. I feel like there's not really anything to worry about if those historical trends continue into the playoffs, but I feel like that's coming to an end now. We have 3 weeks at a time, and does your season continue or is your season over? And that's usually the time we see Hendrick Motorsports step up to begin with. I feel like at this time, Tyler, there's nothing to worry about. I don't think you're hitting that panic button quite yet, but maybe a little bit of cause for concern. But the other thing to keep in mind, too, with Larson, even though he did miss the Coke 600, he is outside of that driver's championship or driver's regular season championship. With Justin Allgaier finishing 13th in the Coke 600, that gave the 5 team 23 extra points in that owner's championship. And we've seen it how the last couple of years there have been situations where a car is able to advance to the playoffs, but maybe the driver is not. And we saw that theme with the 5 car in 2022 as well. So something to keep in the back of our minds where maybe we see a split thing on Sunday. If the points are close enough, maybe that 5 team wins the owner's side of the regular season championship, but Tyler Reddick is the driver who would get that done. So that might be another storyline just to keep in the back of everyone's head.
Yeah, and the owner's points, the 5 team has about a 7-point lead on the 45 right now. I despise the owner's point standings. I wish they would get rid of it totally, but that's not my decision there. So that's another topic for another day. All right, Dom, prediction time. We'll go over our race winners coming up later, but who makes the playoff out of Darlington here of those final playoff spots? Who gets in?
Man, I guess this will be a little revealing. So if you can kind of follow the clues, I know you know Tyler, but I'm sure our listeners will pick up on it real quick. Here are my 3 drivers that make those final 3 spots up: Martin Truex Jr., Ty Gibbs, and Kyle Busch. And I'll leave it at that.
You've been preaching this Kyle Busch thing for weeks. You've been buying in. What do you like about Kyle and that 8 team who's not been good this year, other than last week? Was that a turning point, you think, that Daytona performance?
Well, I'll even take it a step from the week before, maybe even 2 weeks before. Austin Dillon gets the win. All of the shenanigans happen. Yes, all of that is past and done, but there were signs of life from RCR, especially that 3 car. You got to imagine there's a lot of data sharing between those 2 teams. It's naturally going to happen with a 2-car organization with 2 full-time cars. Kyle Busch goes out, backs up that speed with RCR, and Austin Dillon to a point, too, at Michigan. And that 2-tire call, love that 2-tire call from Randall Burnett there in the 3rd stage to try and get the win. Almost worked. Kyle Busch is up front in Daytona. There's momentum here, Tyler. For the first time this year, I believe Kyle Busch has back-to-back top 5 finishes. This is the speed we thought we would see out of Busch. He was the points leader at one point. Not all hope is lost. I'll leave it at that because I'm sure you know who I'm picking as my race winner. But Tyler, who are the 3 that get in your opinion?
I know this sounds boring, but I think it's the 3 that are there right now. I'll go Truex, Gibbs, and Buescher to hold the 14 and 15 and 16 spots at this point. I think Bubba, Ross, Kyle, those guys will lay everything out in the line, but I think they're going to come up short. I think we get a race winner that's already won this year. I'll save my pick for later to get into that final playoff, the final playoff spots as far as that goes. With Darlington, Southern 500, Dom, what a historic event that we've seen, the Southern 500. And there was a point in time, I don't know how many people remember this, where we didn't have the Southern 500, that it disappeared for a bit as they went to just the spring race, and it was not called the Southern 500 for a couple of years. Then it made its return, and now it's been one of the marquee events on the NASCAR calendar. One of the crown jewel events. And, they did the throwback weekend during the Southern 500 for a while. Now that's been moved to the spring race. But, Labor Day weekend, Southern 500, it doesn't get any more NASCAR than this with the lady in black there at Darlington. We've seen this race really put on a show. And we've also seen some names. You want to talk about playoff implications? We've seen names of guys win this race in the past that weren't necessarily contending teams, that kind of were some surprise winners over the years.
Certainly. And what comes to mind on that more recently in the next gen era would be Eric Jones in 2022. A week late. Had that race been where it is now, 43 team would have been in the playoffs. Regan Smith in 2011 getting his first career win come to mind. But you had some of your staples win too over the years. Dale Earnhardt, Terry Labonte, Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, Craig Biffle, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, of course, too, Brad Keselowski. A lot of yesterday names and a lot of current names as well. Richard Petty, a lot of good drivers have gone on to win at Darlington. You don't win by accident at that speedway. And you're right, Tyler, it has a great history with the sport. It's been on the schedule since 1950. It had two races for most of its time through 2004. They went to like a one race a year type deal from 2005 to 2019. And then they had a race 3 times in 2020 because of the circumstances surrounding COVID-19 and the pandemic. And
did a great job. They were one of the few tracks right away that was willing to open their doors and say, yeah, we'll do it.
They sure did. And I think NASCAR didn't forget that. And of course, being a NASCAR owned track got a lot of priority. I think there was a lot of nostalgia around that in 2020, that first race back. So really nice to see Darlington be back and that Southern 500 feel since 2015. You're right. We really didn't have a Southern 500 for about a good 12 years, 11 years, but it has been a staple on the schedule. And no matter what happens on Sunday, it'll be one for the history books.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're absolutely right about that. And one thing I think is worth mentioning, Dom, we saw Brad Keselowski get back to victory lane in this race back in May, on May 12th. His first win in, what was it, 2-3+ years now.
Yeah.
And if you're that 17 team, his teammates, you got to be picking up a lot of the notes, a lot of the details of from what Brad did to get in victory lane here. They got to be feeling pretty good about their chances considering how well Brad ran that race.
And Brad Keselowski is a team player. He'll help. Look at what he did in Daytona last year, pushing Chris Buescher to the win, waiting to the last possible second to ensure an RFK victory. He's a team player till the end. He's going to want to help Chris Buescher get in the playoffs. Everybody on that organization wins if he's able to do it. And Chris Buescher has looked strong at Darlington. He almost won in the spring. He wouldn't even be on the bubble had he was able to come away with the victory there. But there's going to be a lot of helping, and I think you're right to a point, because everyone's running their own race. It's not Daytona. It's not Talladega or Atlanta. But it will be a great race, man. I'm hyped up for it.
One more quick note before we get to our news and notes, Dom. You mentioned the schedule portion of this. Due to the Olympic break and how things worked out, they ended up making this the final race before the playoff. Typically, Daytona obviously was last week, and this is usually the race that starts the playoff. In next year's schedule, which has yet to be revealed yet, but all signs point to that it's going back to this, that Darlington will host the playoff. Dom, I really wish they would have worked it out with the schedule to still have Daytona as the cutoff race and still to make this race Labor Day weekend to start the playoff. I like the excitement of Daytona as the last race before the playoff here. To me, it kind of takes away from it. Like it doesn't feel right being in this spot. I'd much rather it be to start the playoff here. What say you?
Yeah, be the opener. I agree with you. I mean, it's cool that Atlanta's going to open the playoffs, but Darlington, Labor Day weekend, there's been, I guess, a newborn tradition on that over the last few years. And yeah, it's keeping the Labor Day weekend date, but yeah, it should be the opener too. So I see where you're coming from. I think we're missing that, but we know that'll be corrected next year.
Yeah. More to come here on Let's Go Racing. In just a bit, we'll get to our news and notes. Got our mailbag segment as well right here on the program this week. All right, let's get to our news and notes, the top headlines around the sport. Dominic, where do we want to start?
We'll go in chronological order based on the last time we had done this show. So we'll start with Zane Smith, Trackhouse Racing, and SVG, a trilogy not meant to be, Tyler. It was announced earlier this week ahead of the Daytona race that Zane Smith and Trackhouse Racing have parted ways. It's a mutual agreement to part ways. Zane Smith will not be fielding a Trackhouse car in 2025 as previously thought. Tyler, I got to say, you have been saying for months that SVG, limited time here, right? And he's 30 years old. He's not a young guy like a lot of these guys that are picked up by Trackhouse. Maybe a victim of too many drivers and not enough spots for Zane Smith, but SVG going cup racing full time in 2025. You somewhat called it. I got to feel like maybe Justin Marks was listening to the show.
Well, thank you. I'll say this, a couple things. One, the big winner in all this is actually Daniel Suarez. We talked about a couple weeks ago of him signing a 1-year extension, but that didn't seem like much of him getting the 1-year deal, of being a year-to-year thing. They were making a big deal about the extension, but only getting 1 year. Like, okay, that seems kind of odd. Well, now that Zane Smith is out of the equation, that's one less driver that could potentially kick Daniel Suarez out of his seat. And Daniel Suarez with the win, going to the playoffs and all. Now Daniel Suarez has to feel a lot better with Zane Smith out of the picture. And with SVG already getting a ride, SVG is not going to take Daniel Suarez's spot either. Now, you still have Connor Zelich there, and he's going to be in the Xfinity Series full-time in the 88 car. But I would think that it's probably at least a 2-year project of Zelich in the Xfinity Series before he could be ready to go cup racing. So that should buy some more time for Daniel Suarez. So, it kind of reminds me, Dom, of what the Toyota Racing development program had a problem of for so long of, hey, we're developing a lot of talent, but we don't have a ton of seats. And Trackhouse, to their credit, they were putting their money where their mouth is. They were investing in young drivers and spending money, but at the end of the day, they're still a young organization. They only have 2 seats right now. They're about to expand to 3. We don't even know if the charter is going to let them expand to 4 in the next charter deal. So ultimately, Zane Smith was the odd man out. But I think about this too when it comes to Zane Smith. He had that good run at Nashville, but other than that, Zane Smith hasn't run that great. And Trackhouse has been, helping that team and preparing those cars there at Spire. I know that Spire doesn't have necessarily the best reputation when it comes to competitiveness, but they had given him all the Trackhouse stuff that he needed. They were just running it basically a Trackhouse team in the Spire camp. And I think this has to do with performance-based. I think that Trackhouse got some cold feet and saw that, hey, Zane maybe isn't quite ready for prime time just yet. I think Zane's going to be a very good driver, but, I mean, he's not matching, I think, Trackhouse's timeline. And with other teams potentially interested in Zane Smith, that this was an easy decision for them with looking at their stable and where Zane's at right now, where they could say, you know what, actually, this is fine. We can do better than Zane Smith.
And I feel like Zane's going to have options either way. That Spire car probably would still be his if he would like it, or a Front Row Motorsports reunion potentially in the works, or if he needs to go back down to another series like we saw John Henry Mitchell do a few years ago and just kind of have a do-over or reset kind of button. I feel like Zane Smith does have some options on all that. Remains to be seen on some of these rides, but things are filling up fast, Tyler.
Yeah, it is. And, for Zane, like his future, I think is going to be fine. I think he's a very talented race car driver with a bright future, but ultimately it wasn't going to work out there with Trackhouse, and things are going to be okay, quite frankly. And you look at that Trackhouse program, I think that they're all in on Connor Zelich. I think they like him more than they do Zane Smith. And, we'll see what the future holds with Ross and with Daniel and SVG. But to me, this kind of tells me that they like Zelich a lot more than they did Zane Smith. And, if Zane was running better, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. I think that whether it's getting another charter or if it would have been putting him back in that car or a Colleague car or putting SVG in Colleague or something, that'd be a different story. But the fact that he just hasn't had that great of a rookie season, I think that kind of made the decision for them.
Certainly. And you feel like Zane Smith probably will have a chip on his shoulder going forward. And maybe you hear about experiences like this shaping drivers, kind of like that turning point moment or the story arc of a hero's journey. Potentially that's what this is for Zane Smith. things didn't work out the way they were originally supposed to, but who's not to say they could work out for the better?
Yeah, maybe so. We'll see. What else we got?
Well, we know that Richard Childress Racing is only going to have one driver in the playoffs if anybody's able to win on Sunday because Austin Dillon and RCR lost their final appeal on Monday, August 26th. A final appeals committee heard the final appeal on Austin Dillon and their team pleading their case for the Richmond Raceway incident from a couple of weeks ago where Austin Dillon wrecked two drivers and ultimately won the race. The panel held up the appeal, meaning that 25 points is still ever. More importantly, Tyler, that the three team is not eligible for the playoffs based on the Richmond win. So it was on the team to show more of the evidence because the first time the sanctioning body is the one who has to show more of pleading their case. On the final appeal, it is the entity requesting the appeal. And it just didn't happen. Bill Mullis was on, who is the Langley Speedway owner, as one of the appeal officers, but the data presented just they couldn't plead their case correctly, I guess, if you will, Tyler, and RCR's lost out.
It's the right decision by NASCAR. We stated that last week that this was the right call to make. Austin still got the win, but not playoff eligible. That he went too far, and that NASCAR had to put their foot down and go about things accordingly. But I'll say this: for as upset as Austin Dillon, the three team may be, and going through the appeals process and all that, I don't blame him one bit. I would have done the same exact thing, tried to push every single effort they can to be a playoff team, because not only are we talking about competing for a championship, but just dollars and cents wise, it's a huge difference in payout between teams that make the playoff and teams that miss the playoffs. So I don't blame them one bit at all for doing what they did. But the silver lining, as I said last week, and I'll reiterate, is that for Austin Dillon and his three team, you still have had chances. You had a chance at Daytona. You got a chance at Darlington here. You are a lot better off knowing about this now and still having another shot. He very well could win this weekend at Darlington. Who knows? I don't think so, but it's not impossible. It's much better to be in this spot they're in compared to if this had happened at Darlington this week and he was out of the playoff picture now.
Certainly. And like you said, it's better to know now than to be hung in the balance of what could happen. And there's still a shot that he could make the playoffs. But Austin Dillon and Darlington don't tend to have the best track record, but RCR has in the past, and Kyle Busch. So maybe there could be some leaning on each other there. But yeah, Tyler, you have all these drivers that could make the playoffs. I feel like Austin Dillon's one of the longer shot drivers to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think so. We're going racing international finally, huh?
That's going to be the first time since 1958 and only the third time that the NASCAR Cup Series has going to be able to say that they've gone to a foreign country to run a NASCAR points awarding Cup Series race. NASCAR announced on Tuesday, August 27th, that the NASCAR Cup Series and the NASCAR Xfinity Series will be returning to Mexico at the Autodromo, I'm saying it right, I think, Hermanos Rodriguez in 2025 in Mexico in June. That'll be I believe the third weekend in June, June 13th through the 15th. And the Cup and Xfinity Series will be going back. Well, Xfinity's going back. Cup will be doing their first international race since 1958, which was held in Canada. There were two races held in Canada, one in 52 and one in 58, Tyler. Thank you, Jonathan Field, for the reporting on that from the racing experts. But certainly a historic moment to be able to do that and have Daniel Suarez a part of the announcement, Ben Kennedy. I was on the conference call when they made that announcement on Tuesday. And Tyler, I got to say, there was a lot of excitement around the room, a lot of reporters asking questions. And of course, too, being brought up with the whole situation with Kyle Busch and the incident with taking the gun on the airplane and being arrested in Mexico in 2023. Would Busch be eligible to race? Bob Pockers of Fox Sports was the first one to come out of the gate and just ask it straight up as the opening question of the press detailing there, Tyler. But really good to hear NASCAR saying that they worked with all the people they needed to work with, authorities, getting everything in line. It sounds like Kyle Busch, they don't foresee, and those were Ben Kennedy's words, they do not foresee any issues with Kyle Busch competing in that event next year.
Let's talk about Kyle here in a second. Let's talk about the event first. This is great. Richmond loses a date. They had not been selling out in recent memory. Denny Hamlin, that's his home track, and he even said straight up, he's like, "Look, this race hasn't been supported like it has in the past. It sucks, but can't blame him one bit." And that's what NASCAR's been doing. I've been saying they need to do this for a while. Diversify the schedule, less tracks with 2 races, find new markets. You go into Mexico City, and this is a huge opportunity. And you go to an established track. It's not like when we went to Chicago and had to build a street course and all that with this. You're going to a road course. We are going to race no matter what because we can get out the rain tires if we need to and let these guys put on a show. And, the road trip wise to Mexico City, these haulers and all that stuff, like this is going to be just like them going to the West Coast. Like this is not hard. This is not impossible for the teams to pull off. So it's logistically within their realm of possibility. I think it makes a ton of sense. Prime Video is going to get the race, so that's big for Prime Video to have the first ever race in Mexico. I'm happy for Daniel Suarez for him to get to race in his home country. He said winning this to him would be just as big as winning the Daytona 500. That's how big of a deal it would be, and he very well could win. He won Sonoma a couple years ago. I loved the races they did at this track in the Busch Series back in the day. We saw Martin Truex win there, and those guys put on a show. To me, this is a great ad. I'd love to see Canada potentially get added to the mix. I know they've had negotiations with Montreal over the last couple of years, but NASCAR in Mexico, staying, within the continent. You're not going to have any weird TV times or anything. You get to expand the sports reach internationally. You get to go to a very good world-class facility. They host an F1 race there every year. To me, this is a no-brainer on the part of NASCAR to pull this off.
Certainly, Tyler, and I think you look at the big picture of it too. Mexico City being, believe, the second biggest city when you take across the Americas, North, Central, and South America, only behind Sao Paulo, Brazil. So it's a very big market that NASCAR is definitely tapping into and re-tapping into at that, because Cup never has raced there. But we had heard it last year. NASCAR was telling industry insiders, and the word was for people to get their passports ready for team personnel and drivers and transport haulers and all of that. So yeah, I'm just curious too. One thing that at least I didn't hear it in the press conference, if it will be a longer haul, would we have an off week after the fact, or how that would all look? Because I mean, it still is a long haul for sure, but all those logistics will get worked out. It sounds like NASCAR wants to continue to do this. This wouldn't be a 1-year vibe, is what I got from the press conference. They want to keep going to Mexico City, and I think that opens the door too, Tyler. We saw earlier this week, Sports Business Journal friend of the show, Adam Stern, telling about how San Diego is interested in also having a street course. So the interest in NASCAR is growing, and it's certainly growing internationally, but even domestically too. There are a lot of markets interested in having NASCAR, hosting some sort of NASCAR event. So it feels like maybe we might get to a point where we might have to be doing bidding at some point, where cities might have to outbid each other for a NASCAR event.
And that would be great for the sport financially, and to reach more people if they could. The San Diego idea, NASCAR's looking to be in the LA market now that the Clash is not going to be there. California, they're still rebuilding that right now. That's not ready for a race anytime soon. San Diego could be a good fit for a street race potentially. The Long Beach thing didn't work out for them when they tried to buy up that race event, that IndyCar event. But yeah, Mexico City, I got to tell you, I'm happy for Daniel Suarez too, because you think about it, Dom. Every week, we get 40 drivers, and most of the time, 39 of them are from the U.S. And there's Daniel Suarez, the Mexican, as he's been referred to by some. And he's, our amigo. He's an American now. He loves this country. He's embraced America. But each and every week when he takes the NASCAR course, for the most part, it's him on our turf, right? Now we get to go to his country, and the way that he's embraced this and how happy he is for him to get to show off in a race that he can go out there and win, Pitbull by his side and everything. I'm more than anything, I'm happy for Daniel Suarez that he gets this chance. And I give him kudos, Dom, for the way he's treated this as an ambassador, how excited he is, and to be kind of the face of this. This is big for Daniel, and I can't wait to see what he does with the other drivers of getting to host the other drivers in his world.
Absolutely. We're going to be on his home turf, his home playground. Like you said, him saying how big of a victory this would be for him. I mean, how could you not? NASCAR is racing in your home country, and they want you to be a part of promoting the event. almost a year out, and just the involvement that the sport wants with him.
And credit to NASCAR for doing that, to reach out to him, to not just say, yeah, we're coming to Mexico, but to already prioritize marketing Daniel Suarez. We criticize NASCAR from time to time, and they've done a bad job marketing wise. Credit where credit's due. Ben Kennedy and Daniel Suarez both to get Daniel involved right away on this.
Certainly so. Certainly a great call, and it's got me excited for the race. We don't even know the rest of the schedule yet, but we know that's going to be one that is circled and is going to have a lot of coverage.
Now, the Kyle Busch factor. Let's talk about that real quick. He had the arrest where he didn't realize that his handgun was in his luggage. And he said, "Hey, I got a concealed carry permit back home in North Carolina." And they said, "Hey, if you stayed in Mexico, you'd be sentenced to 3 years in prison." Ultimately, he worked with U.S. authorities, got things worked out, and was in the clear. But part of the agreement was he would not return to Mexico and all that. Well, we've heard NASCAR say that, to their knowledge, everything's clear and good to go. Dom, I'm of the belief, and you may disagree with me on this, I think it would be such a PR nightmare for them to do this race if Kyle Busch could not race, that I don't even think it would happen. I do not think they would have agreed to this if Kyle Busch was not allowed to race. I think that this is a big deal for NASCAR, for Kyle Busch to get this taken care of now so he can race here, because that would be just a never-ending topic of discussion for NASCAR, for Mexican authorities, Richard Childress, and Kyle Busch if he couldn't race here. Like, we would never hear the end of it.
I agree with you to a point. I feel like it would be a PR disaster. I feel like you're just going to be answering questions about the entire time. But at
It
the
would
same
overshadow
time,
the event.
it might overshadow the event, but at the same time, the entity of NASCAR and NASCAR itself is bigger than any one driver or any team, whether we want to believe that or not. I think back to the Dale Earnhardt Jeff Bodine rivalry of the 1980s, where Bill France calls him down to Daytona and says, "Look, you guys need to stop stinking up my show. We don't need you. Dale, you can go back to North Carolina. Jeff, you can go back to New York. We don't need you." And granted, that was a different time. That was a generation and a half ago, but before. But
But that's not,
NASCAR will continue the show whether you are there or not.
I
They would have
disagree with
likely
that.
given him a waiver, but I just don't see how they're going to bend over backwards for one
I
driver. I'm glad
disagree
they
with
worked with
that.
them, Tyler.
Dom, I know that your head is in your ass still in 1980, but this is a different time now. And for me, it's not even so much Kyle Busch. It is the PR side of things. That's what's different now compared to 1980. You don't have to worry. You didn't have to worry about social media back then. You didn't have to worry about the ever-ending news cycle. And to me, it's not even about Kyle Busch. You could even call, let's pick another driver's name, like, I don't
Chase
know.
Elliott. Chase Elliott
Chase
last
Elliott.
year. The show went on at Gateway. They don't care, man. They would just
Oh,
give
went
him a
on, yeah,
waiver and
because
say
he was suspended. Yes, but that was a different story. This, it would be an internet. Let's say Chase Elliott. Do you really want the international headlines of this gun charge and he can't be there and all this? Like, to me, it's the PR side of things. It's not even necessarily the driver. I don't think NASCAR would want that bad publicity.
And at the end of the day, it wouldn't matter on the publicity or not. Years down the road, no one's going to remember that. They're just going to remember the Mexico
Oh,
race. They
I
will
beg
remember
your
the Mexico race, man. Good press, bad press. It doesn't matter. It's press coverage. And you got to imagine NASCAR.
Everybody's going to remember that Kyle Larson didn't run the Coke 600 this year.
Maybe so. But the show continued. The show continued. Look at that. Justin Allgaier still ran the race. They ran Gateway just fine
NASCAR
without
made
Chase Elliott. They would run that Mexico race just fine
and you
without
know what
Kyle
they
Busch.
did? NASCAR avoided a PR nightmare by giving Kyle Busch a playoff waiver.
Or Larson. They give Kyle Larson a playoff.
Kyle Larson, yes.
They would give Kyle Busch a playoff waiver in the same situation. No doubt about it. Whether Busch was
It would
approved or
be a
not,
PR nightmare for him not to be there.
too much at stake for that just to be concerned with one driver. They concerned themselves with every driver's affairs. They wouldn't get anything done.
I disagree. I think that you have to keep in mind the PR side of things, that you do not want that headache. And NASCAR took care of business. Who knows? Maybe that's why they didn't go to Mexico last year. Maybe they didn't have this worked out.
Hard to say, but I would imagine on the surface, Tyler, there's too many business dealings going on in the sport that they would just bend the rules for one driver. or bend their decision making for one driver. It's
It's
hard sell for me on
you're
that one.
totally missing this. You're too focused on the driver. This is about the public relations side of things.
I think you're not focused on the business side of it because there are so many things going on with it. It's too big of a market to capitalize. They'll run the race without Kyle Busch. There will be a day where he's no longer in the race car. That's maybe too far down the road. But in the event that he wasn't able to race, they're still going to run that race. If there's a race to be run and so many other great factors that could be positive out of one driver missing, they would have done it.
Is NBC Nightly News going to cover a NASCAR race in Mexico? No, but they're going to cover a NASCAR driver not being allowed to race because he's got a gun charge in Mexico. That to me is very, very important. And NASCAR wants to avoid all the negative headlines they can. I'm glad it worked out.
Me too.
I think this happen. But I think we would be very naive to not think that the PR element did not play a significant role in this case. But nonetheless, let's get to the odds this week.
All right, we'll move on because it is null and void. I will say that too. We're glad he can race. That is, I think, the main point we got to drive on this. But heading into this weekend with the Cookout Southern 500 at Darlington Raceway, we know it's going to be the last race of the regular season. Looking at the odds, Tyler, have you looked at the odds or not yet?
I have not.
Who's your odds-on favorite? If you had to give a prediction, what is their odds spread?
Oh, let's see. Odds on favorite. I'm going to go Kyle Larson plus 600.
Kyle Larson at plus 600. That is a really good guess. Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, and Tyler Reddick are all co-favorites to win the Southern 500 at plus 550 or 5.5 to 1.
Oh, I was very close.
Very, very close. Had you picked any of those three, you would have gotten a pass on that. The winner from the springtime, Brad Keselowski, at 9 to 1 or plus 900. William Byron, who won the race in the spring of last year, plus 1,000 or 10 to 1. Other drivers throughout the field, Ty Gibbs, 10 to 1, Truex, 12 to 1, Christopher Bell, 14 to 1, Kyle Busch at 16 to 1, along with Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, Ross Chastain, and Christopher Buescher, all at 18 to 1, Chase Elliott, 20 to 1, Bubba Wallace, who's needing a win, at 25 to 1. And some of the other long shots as you start going through the field, some of the longest shots of anybody, I should add, Daniel Hemrick at 1,500 to 1. So there's some really long shots in there. Harrison Burton, who was last week's winner, also sitting at plus 75,000 or at 750 to 1.
Okay. So with that, time for our picks this week. You kind of teased already what your pick was this week. Dominic, any second thoughts on this pick?
No, not at all. We've talked about him a lot this year. I feel like this should be Let's Go Racing with Kyle Busch because Kyle Busch is going to win on Sunday night.
Okay, you're feeling pretty confident about that. I will go with Kyle Larson to get back in victory lane. I think Kyle Larson gets a win, tries to make a final push to win that regular season title, and get those 15 points for the playoff. It's going to be tough to make up 17 points on Tyler Reddick. Probably going to require a win. I think he gets the win to get as close as he possibly can to win that regular season title. So that's my pick this week.
All right. Well, we'll see how it all fares out. It's going to be a great race no matter what. There's so many storylines to follow.
Indeed it is. Dom, let's get to our mailbag segment this week. You guys can submit questions to us by email, davidstarpodcast@gmail.com, also on X and Facebook at Star Podcast. And our first question from the inbox this week comes from James. James wants to know, guys, with it being Labor Day weekend, what kind of labor outside of your day jobs do you enjoy doing?
A good question, Tyler. For me, there's two things I enjoy doing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be Labor Day. As long as it's warm outside, I like going outside and pulling the weeds. There's something very calming about that too. Oh, I don't mind it one bit. You get the big weeds, you get the little small ones, you get the shovel. I like to pull them by hand, if I'm being honest. And in the wintertime, I really enjoy going outside to go and shovel snow. Those are just two things.
What?
Oh, absolutely. Manual labor stuff.
What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you? Let's hear yours.
I love getting on the riding mower and mowing the lawn.
Okay.
I don't like to push mow. I don't like to weed eat. I don't like to pull weeds. But there is something relaxing about getting outside on the riding mower and just driving around, cutting that grass, and getting a little tan, break a little sweat. and have a little cold beer or something. For me, it's the riding mower specifically.
Do you feel like you're like on a go-kart or like a Mario Kart type deal, mowing the grass?
Yes.
Okay. So it might be the racing factor a little bit behind that too.
Yeah, and trying to keep a straight line and everything too. I mean, yeah, like especially like as a kid, obviously I couldn't drive a car, but I could drive the riding mower, and that was the closest thing I could get to. And and you take pride in it, like you want a good lawn, precision, how it looks, all your neighbors are going to see it. Like there's something about that to me. You take pride in that. So for me, it'd be mowing the lawn would be that one activity. Now, as far as other activities, Dom, I'll say this: like, I don't clean as much as I should, but when I do, I like to have some good smells going. So for me, it's getting out the spray bottles and cleaning the countertops to make them smell good. The Clorox wipes and all that. It's getting the candles and creating nice scents in the room. Like for
Scentsy
me,
pots, that kind of stuff.
yes. Like when you have people over, I feel like you want it to be a place where people want to be, feel welcoming. And I think just good smells make it more welcoming to the guests you're hosting, more appetizing to be there.
It's like when somebody's got food going on the stove, you can smell it as you walk in the house, or like for me, a big thing of pinto beans going on overnight, or a pot of coffee in the morning, and just it makes the
Yes.
whole house that aroma just kind of travel. I'm with you there, and I don't know if you consider it labor, Tyler, but one of my favorite things to do, besides the weed pulling and shoveling snow, which I do find therapeutic, by the way, but I do enjoy going to the gym. I enjoy riding the stationary bike. I enjoy running and been training for a little bit of a run that I'm planning to do here in November. And like going to the gym about 3, 4 times a week is something that I really do take a lot of pride in. And just going out to break a sweat, you feel good after it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you do. I think you absolutely do. That's a great question. Thanks, James, for that question this week. Our next question comes from Greg. Greg wants to know if you guys could be anywhere for Labor Day weekend, where would it be and why? Dom, would it be Darlington for you, or would it be somewhere else?
No, it'd probably be a family vacation with my wife and son, and maybe going somewhere. And like the last
Family vacation to Darlington?
family vacation to Darlington. Well, I don't know about that one, but the last few years we've kind of been on the road for Labor Day weekend, so I've been catching Darlington on the road. But it's been a lot of Western Arizona, Nevada, so maybe somewhere like that, kind of relax and get away from town for a few days. How about you, Tyler?
So I'm actually going to where I want to be this weekend. So I'm going to the USC LSU game in Vegas. Literally, I've had this game circled on my calendar for a year. When they announced this matchup, I said I want to go. I want to be there. It's the one Sunday I have off during football season, and I can go gamble and have a good time, enjoy the sun, relax by the pool, and watch college football. So for me, that's how I'll be spending my Labor Day weekend. Fly out Friday morning and there till early Monday morning. So I will enjoy accordingly in Vegas, a place that Dominic frequents these days.
Well, I don't know about frequents, but I do go twice a year for the NASCAR race weekend, and we did take a family vacation out there in July. So it is nice. It is a really nice area. I'm
So
glad.
you are going 3 times this year. That sounds like somebody that frequents Vegas.
Is that well? I guess your definition of frequent and mine are going to be different,
If
but
you go anywhere more than once a year, you are a frequent visitor.
based on that definition, I guess I frequent quite a few places then.
Okay. Yes, you
But
you
does it
frequent.
count if work takes you there? Because it's not necessarily a
Yes,
lot of leisure trips.
absolutely it does.
Okay. All right.
But you pick and choose the races you want to go to anyway.
You're not wrong. So same as you.
I don't. I think. Are you ashamed of your frequent visits to Vegas here? Or are you shy about this?
I wouldn't say I'm shy. I wouldn't know if I would consider myself frequent because there are quick trips, and there's been times where I've gone to Vegas and I don't even set foot on the strip or go near it because we stay away from the strip or at the racetrack, consumed with what we're doing, and then leave so quick. So I wouldn't say there's no shame with it whatsoever. It's just, I don't know if I really feel like I'm worthy of saying that I frequent Vegas. I don't think it, when people think Vegas, they have something in their head where they think the strip, gambling, whatever. I don't really do that on most of the trips.
So the last time we were in Vegas, we stayed at the Tuscany.
Yes.
And as I make these Vegas trips, Dom, I'm trying to stay somewhere different each time now. We stayed at the Tuscany before. We stayed let's see, the Sahara. We stayed at the Hilton off the strip
Yeah,
one
by the
time.
stadium, by the football stadium. Yeah.
Yes. And this time I'm staying at the Luxor.
Yeah, I've heard some good things about the Luxor. Felicia, my wife has stayed there, and I think she stayed there as a kid. And I remember her saying some really good things about it. So yeah,
Okay.
it's really good. You're right
Where are
there
the
too by the game.
where are the places you have stayed in Vegas?
Somebody was asking me that the other day. I've stayed at the Excalibur, the Harris, the Bally's. I guess Bally's got renamed. I'm not sure what the new name is there. The Tuscany, the Sahara, Embassy Suites, Home Two Suites. I think I've stayed at a Hampton out there. And then most recently was the Fountain Blue, that brand new property that just opened a few months back. It's near the Stratosphere on the north end. Gotta say, man, a little pricey. I think 250, 275 on a week. That's a little out of my price range, but it was nice to say we did it. But as we get off air, I'm going to think of more places that we have stayed. Samstown, longtime sponsor of the Xfinity race. They have their stuff
Yes.
off the strip. The D there on Fremont Street. So there's been a few places.
Did you ever stay at the South Point?
Did once actually, and in fact, when Felice and I we were dating, she came as a photographer to one of the races, and David was so nice to let us stay not only with them, he gave up his bed and he ended up making his couch as like a makeshift bed. It was very very nice of him. That was in 2021 when he was running for Carl. So very things you won't forget. And yeah, that was really really nice of David to do that for us. He certainly didn't have to do that.
Well, he let me stay in his house for 5 months too. So he's gone out of his way for us over the years. He's had our back.
As David would say, he's a good guy. He's a buddy.
He's a buddy. He's a good guy. That's awesome, buddy.
Yeah.
So I revealed my plans for Vegas. What I'm doing this weekend. What are you doing this weekend, Dom?
It'll be a home game this weekend for me. I'll be actually in Atlanta next weekend for the playoff opener, but I'm gonna enjoy the weekend at home and actually hitting the recording studio. So a lot of you guys know I played drums in a band for 8 years. Tyler's musically inclined himself as well, but our band, we're getting a little back together to go record one of our original songs, the three of us. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna probably be a little rusty on the drum set. Last time it took me 8 takes to lay down the drums, while it took 1 or 2 takes for everyone else because I'm such a perfectionist. But that'll be Saturday. And then Saturday night, spend that with the family. Sunday as well. We have a birthday with my cousin Anthony. And then we're going to be spending the race weekend Sunday night. So it should be fun.
I'll be nice to Anthony, and I won't say any mean things about him.
Well, that's good. Yeah, he
although
looks up to you. He's very impressionable, and he looks up to you, Tyler.
Okay. Well, I could say some mean things, but I won't. He's a good kid.
He's a good kid.
He means well.
He does.
On that note, we'll put the checkered flag out in this edition of Let's Go Racing. As always, subscribe to show new episodes out each and every week. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, also on YouTube as well. Hit the like button. We'd certainly appreciate it. Follow us on social media, X at Starr Podcasts, Facebook, also by email, davidstarrpodcast@gmail.com. This show, part of the Studio Soapbox Network. Check out this show, The Jones Report, the Coach Bo Knows podcast on all podcast platforms. For Dominic Aragon and David Starr, I'm Tyler Jones. Thanks so long. This has been another edition of Let's Go Racing. We'll see you next week.